Namaha. Om. So after a long time, we are resuming our Gita talks. Okay. Just a minute. I'll readjust my phone. Now it is okay. Yeah. So in the 5th chapter, we were discussing what shloka? Tadbuddhayas tadatmanaha. 17th shloka. Tadbuddhayas tadatmanaha tannishtas tatparayana gacchantya punaravrittim jnana nirdhuta kalmasha. This was the shloka we were discussing. Okay. So previous to this, in the previous shloka, jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitamatmana. Oh, sorry. I have not put it. Just a minute. Now can you hear me? I forgot to plug my mic. Now I think you can hear. Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashitamatmana tesham adityavajnanam prakashayati tatparam. So an ajnani continues to be jiva and suffer all the samsara. And when he gains the jnanam, then he becomes free from that ignorance and his knowledge shines. Shines means his knowledge remains natural. His knowledge, tesham adityavad jnanam prakashayati. It shines naturally like the sun, like the light of a sun. Okay. Now the yat param jnanam prakashitam. Now how do you get that jnanam? Is stated in this 17th shloka. How do we get that jnanam? Tad buddhayaha tadatmanaha tannishthas tatparayanaha gacchantya punaravrittim jnana nirdhuta kalmashaha. So those who follow this sadhana, in fact this shloka doesn't say sadhana. It talks of two ways. It talks of the jnani state. So whatever is it is a description of jnani state. So a description of jnani state, becomes automatically a sadhana for sadhakas. Okay, because whatever is jnani, whatever is the nature of jnani, the same thing a sadhaka is aspiring to become. Therefore, he has to discover. In fact, in other words, instead of saying that you are understanding Brahman, you have to say that you are discovering yourself as a jnani. See, in Vedanta, knowing the Atman, knowing Brahman means discovering yourself as a jnani, which you have been, which you are already existing. So there, you only wake up to your state of being a jnani. Jnani of what? Jnani of being Brahman. What else is? So here, tad buddhayaha, how will he do? He has to make certain adjustment. That contemplation, that vichara is described in these ways. Tad buddhayaha. So, jnanis are tad buddhaya. Tad buddhi means what? One whose buddhi is tat. Tat means Paramatma. Tasmin brahmani gata buddhi yesham te tad buddhaya. Simple. Here Shankaracharya only split the samasa, didn't explain anything much. Only we have to do a lot of manana. So they people whose buddhi is, buddhi means the thinking faculty, the intellect. The intellect or the mind is tad buddhi, means the mind thinks of, or the thought of your mind is about Brahman, isn't it? The thought about your mind, the thought of your mind is about Brahman. Tad buddhi. Buddhi is your mind whose thought is about Brahman alone. No, what is big deal about it? You say tad buddhi, it is easily understood. No, there is some deeper thing. In Vedanta, as we have been telling, every sentence has to be understood as an adhyaropapavada. Okay. Every sentence has to be seen as some adhyaropa or apavada. Okay. As a part of. Otherwise it cannot be understood at all. Tad buddhayaha. It means whose buddhi is Paramatma. How do you do that? Because our buddhi is about the world. See, this is an interesting thing. Our mind is a mind. Our mind is a mind only when it thinks of its objects. Now, what are the objects? Only worldly objects alone. That means our mind has assumed into the waking state and the waking world. When you are experiencing the dream, our mind has assumed the form of the dream world, isn't it? Our mind has assumed the form of subject, sense organs, mind, and the world. Here, mind means you have to say this entire mind. Remember this. You have to take this entire mind. What is this entire mind? See, for example, in the dream, during the dream, our mind, the very mind assumes the shape of the entire dream. Entire dream means the dream subject of the dream state, the dream mind and sense organs, and the dream objects. This entire state is nothing but mind alone. Mind alone assumes. Similarly, in the waking state, our mind assumes the waking world, shape of the waking world. That means the waking subject, that is the waking jnata, waking knower, and the waking mind, waking sense organs, and the waking objects. It assumes the entire state. Okay. So, this mind, which is normally divided into subject and object, and continuously facing the objects alone. It is continuously aware of the object. It is interacting. It is knowing the object. By knowing alone, it remains the subject of it, and it remains continuously in relationship with. This is what is our mind. Now he says, this mind should become Brahman mind. Now our mind is in the form of the world, prapanchakara vritti. Our mind is assuming the shape of the world. Now this mind has to drop the world, and the same mind should assume the shape of Brahman. Tad buddhi, it means only this. Now here, that means your mind has assumed the shape of subject and object. Okay. Subject and object. Now this has to recede. Recede means what? It has to break this duality between subject and object and assumes the shape of Brahman. How is it possible? That's because, see, the whole wakeful consciousness assumes the shape of waking state. See, this is an interesting. This is what our experience shows. The wakeful, in fact, our consciousness, when it you have to say that the Sakshi, the nature of Atma, or the pure consciousness, when it assumes the shape of the waking state, you call it wakeful consciousness. Okay, That means the same consciousness is illumining the waking world. That means it is assuming the shape of the waking state. It assumes the shape of dream state, or it assumes the shape of sushupti, the deep sleep state. Now, it has to assume the nature of deep sleep while falsifying, while including the waking and dream. See, what we require is our consciousness has to assume the shape of, the buddhi has to assume the shape of deep sleep while including the waking and dream state. It has to include the waking world and the dream world and assumes the state of deep sleep. That means it should understand that the waking and dream are inseparable from the pure consciousness. This inseparability is a thought. That means the mind as a whole understands that it doesn't exist apart from the very consciousness. It doesn't exist apart from the pure consciousness. So it is in another shape, another form of the consciousness. It doesn't exist apart from consciousness. When it thinks that it exists apart from the consciousness, there is a waking state, isn't it? When the mind thinks that I am seeing the world, I am existing and seeing the world. Two things. I am existing as an individual and seeing the world. I am an existing individual and seeing the world. That is a waking state. And the same thing becomes a dream when the world doesn't exist apart from the very thought. Okay. It is a dream when you understand that the very mind is assuming both the subject and object. Then in deep sleep, this whole mind merges into deep sleep. It merges, but again it comes back. Okay. Now, it neither merges nor comes back. It is already one with consciousness. It never existed, neither before nor now. It never existed apart from consciousness. It pervades the entire consciousness. Or how do you say the mind pervades the consciousness? Or in other words, either you say mind pervades the entire consciousness, or say mind is swallowed by the consciousness. Mind, how to say that? Mind gets merged into consciousness. This is better. Mind gets merged into consciousness. That means mind cannot be seen apart from consciousness, isn't it? That means it's like when there is a photo and there is a glass. When you have a framed photo, the glass is a cover covering the photo. Now the glass being a transparent, it assumes the shape of photo. When you see the through the glass, you don't see the glass, you only see the photo. Glass also becomes one with the photo. See, isn't it interesting? A glass plate, when you cover a photograph in frame. Nowadays you have got laminations. In those days, previous days, there used to be a glass plate covering that photograph and a framed around, fixed by a frame. There, in this, when you see the glass, you don't see the glass at all. You see directly the photo. Then where is the glass? Glass has merged into the photo. See, isn't it interesting? See, this example is very good. The glass has merged into the photo. You see directly photo and you see as if there is no glass at all. There is no glass at all. Similarly, the antakarana, the mind merges into Brahman. It doesn't have an existence apart from Brahman. So this is called tadbuddhayaha. The buddhi becomes one with Brahman. It doesn't exist apart from Brahman. That means mind as a mind doesn't exist. That's why in that Mandukya Karika says it is manasaha amani bhave. Mind becomes amani. Mind becomes no mind. Mind becomes amanaha. Amanaha means mindless. Mind becomes mindless. How? How is it possible that mind becomes mindless? Because mind goes into its core. When the mind turns its attention to its core, its content, in content it is consciousness, only in its outside frame alone, frame means external shape alone is mind. It's like if a gold is in a shape of an ornament, ornament is not in the gold, ornament is only the, what is a periphery. What is ornament? Do you see what is ornament in a gold? There is a gold, piece of gold, okay? The piece of gold, when you look at the gold, you look at its edges. Edge means the periphery. The periphery or edge alone has got a shape. Gold doesn't have a shape. The gold as a metal doesn't have a shape. What is the shape of the gold when you say? Form of the gold, that means its periphery. Its edge alone has got a shape. The edge alone is called ornament. So the content is gold, the edge is ornament. So similarly here, the consciousness has an edge as it were. So the edge is the mind. You go to the content inside, it is consciousness. Just like a wave. Wave is only its a peripheral view. The edge of water alone is wave. Otherwise, wave or tank or river or anything, it is only a periphery. The peripheral or the edge of it. When you go to inside of it, when you go to the content of it, it is only water. Water without a shape. Then when you are seeing a wave, is it not water? It is water. When you are seeing the wave, it is water. Then when you see the water, it is water. What is this? Is the water and wave are two? No. The same water, you see its edge or you see its content. When you see the content, it is a shapeless water. When you see the edge of it, it is the water with a shape. That's all. Water with a shape, water ignoring the shape. You look at just water. That means you go to the content of it. You don't look at the edge of it. You don't look at the periphery of it. You come to the center of it. You look inward. Similarly, here in the consciousness, you have to look inwardly, not to the edge of it. Okay? When you are looking to the edge of it, then the world appears. What is the edge? You become a pramata. You become a knower, and there is an edge. So you are a jnatru pramatru looking at an edge. That means you coming to your edge and you look at an object. Object is something looking at your edge. Looking at the edge of a gold is called an ornament. You see a shape. Similarly, consciousness divides. Unless it divides, you can't have an edge. Consciousness is infinite. Consciousness is dimensionless. It doesn't have a dimension. It doesn't have it doesn't have an area. It doesn't have a limitation. Therefore, you can't see an edge. Isn't it? You can't see an edge to this thing. Seeing an edge is the world. Okay, that is a shape. Seeing an edge is a shape. So a dimension. But when the consciousness turns inward, it loses its dimension. It means it loses its dimension alone is subject object. Dimension means seeing something, you have an edge, you are somebody, and seeing something else. This subject object duality alone is dimension. Subject object duality alone is coming to the edge. Like coming to the edge of the gold. But gold is gold in the illustration, in the example, is a limited vastu. It has got a shape. Shape means what? It occupies a limited area. It is a limited thing. A thing which is what is limited? It occupies a smaller area. That's what limitation. Limitation means having a dimension. But consciousness is like a space. Can you see the edge of the space? This is a good example. Can you see the edge of the space? Periphery of the space? Because space has no dimension. Space has no area. Space has no shape. It has no dimension. There, similarly, consciousness has no dimension. If you see the dimension, it is only an artificial, it is imposed, it is imagined, not real. Like imagining a shape to the space. You imagine the space, see this much, a triangle shape or a tetraangle space, a round space, or you say a triangle space. You see a pot, you see a round space. What is pot? A round space is pot. Round space is pot. Tetraangular space is room. Okay. Tetraangular. Not only a tetraangular, it is a square. A room is a square. Okay. The square shape is room. The room space is square shape. A round shape is pot space. And there is a flask also in chemistry, in the chemistry lab, there is a conical shape, like this, a triangular shape. Then you will have a triangular space. So what are these spaces? They are imagined, they are imposed. You impose a dimension. That means you imagine a shape where it doesn't exist. Okay. So similarly, subject-object duality is imagining a dimension. I am this much, and there is something other than me. How can you say there is something other than me? If I become a narrow and small, when I assume an area, when I assume a limitation, two things happen. One, there is an edge for me, and there is something other than me. These two things simultaneously come to your experience. I am somebody limited and I see something other than me. So you see an edge or a periphery to you and see something other than you apart from you. So this is when you assume a shape. But like a space doesn't have any shape. A shapeless, that means a dimensionless. What is dimensionless cannot have a shape, because shape means, as I told you, a form or shape means looking at its edge, coming to its edge. But space is dimensionless. That means you cannot have an edge of a space. Is there any edge? No. Similarly, consciousness is like space which doesn't have an edge. Okay. Consciousness doesn't have any edge. That means there is no periphery. It is an infinite. It goes on, continuous. What is continuous doesn't have any end. Infinite means what? No ending, no edge. It's continuous, eternally continuous, endless. Any side you go, it is endless. This is the beauty of consciousness. Consciousness is endless, any side. Whether front, back, left and right and up and down, all sides of it, any side you go, endless. You go on and on and on and 1,000 kilometers, still it is endless. Still go on, still endless. Even after 1,000 kilometers, it is still on. There is no end. You never find an end to it. This is the beauty of it. You can never see that this is where I end. Hereafter I don't exist. Do you ever think that my consciousness ends here and beyond that I have no consciousness? Because even to think of it, you need consciousness. So consciousness cannot think of its own end. Consciousness cannot perceive, cannot conceive, cannot understand, or cannot be aware of its own end. Consciousness cannot be aware of its own end. This is what we mean infinity. When we say infinite consciousness, dimensionless consciousness only implies that consciousness cannot see, cannot be aware of its own end. If it could be aware of its end, it could see its edge. If it could see its edge, then it could see its shape. A shape. Then there would be subject-object duality. I am me and there is something other than me. Me and other than me. There would be two. But in the consciousness, there are no two. While we are seeing the two, me and the remaining me, the other than me, something other than me, this duality is a false imposition, a false imagination in the content. That's why I told a wave. Wave is also water. Water is also water. But what is wave? Wave is the same water looked at its edge. You are looking at its periphery. You are looking at its edge. Then you call it wave. Then how to get rid of the wave? Look inwardly. Inwardly means what? Look at the content of it, not to the edge of it. Okay? Look at the content of it, not to the edge of it. Similarly, when you are as an individual, looking at the external world, external means what? There is a shape, there is a limitation to you. You subject ends and object begins. You somewhere end and you see something other than you. This division is because you are looking at an edge of you and something outside you. You end and there is something outside you other than you. This divisiveness is a false thing. Then how to this is called looking at the edge of it. Now instead of looking at the edge, go look at inwardly, look at the content of yourself. Content of yourself means not at the content means what? See, don't imagine exactly like water. See, take example of water, but it doesn't fit in. Water is not exactly like Atma. So take example once again, water and its edge. Edge is the wave. Wave or any shape. Why wave? Any shape. Any shape is looking at the edge of water. To avoid the edge, to avoid seeing the wave, what do? You look at its content. Content means what? You don't see the edge of the water. You see the water, all sides water, front water, back water, left water, right water, upper side, above water, below the water. Okay. Over you is water and below you is water. Everywhere is a water. That means there is no end. There is no coming to an edge. This is called looking inwardly, looking to the content of water, not to the edge of water. Now you understand the point. Not looking at the edge of the water. Any object you take it has got an edge. Isn't it? Any object you take, it has got an edge. It has got an end point. So here, the wave or any shape of water means what? You are looking at an edge of it. You are looking at a periphery of it. Now, to avoid this periphery, you look inwardly. Inwardly means what? You look at the content of water. Content of a wave. Content means not looking at the edge, but looking at a water where all sides there is water, there is a continuity of water, there is no ending of water, there is no breaking of water, there is no edge of water. So similarly, you are looking at a consciousness where there is no edge. Now we are seeing as if there is an edge. I am a subject and there is an object. I am somebody and there is something other than me. So this division is nothing but an artificial edge you are creating in the consciousness. Artificial edge we are creating. But the space, you see, space is dimensionless. Space is dimensionless. It has no dimension. Means what? See, water has got an edge. Any object has got an edge. Means you can come to the end of it. End point, periphery of it. Now, can you come to the end point of space? You are in the space. Can you see an end point of a space? You go on, it is on. Still on. It is continuing, eternal continuity. Continuous continuity. I don't know how to use the word. Continuous continuity. That means there is no edge for it. So when there is no edge for it, you have no shape. When you have no shape, you don't end. When you don't end, there is no second to you. There is nothing other than you. This is what Advaita means. Dvaita means when there is an edge, when there is an end, you end here and something else begins. Something other than you begins. But when you look at yourself as an ending, as having an edge, you become a wave. You become a wave when you see an edge of you. But instead of that, you turn your attention inward. You means as a water, I am telling. You turn inward to the water. You look to the content of the wave. Content of the wave means what? No looking at the edge. You look at the water which doesn't have an edge, which is continuous. It is always continuous. Water is continuous, endless. Any side you see, it is endless. Then it is infinity, shapeless, formless. Similarly, mind is a mind only when it sees an edge. So mind is nothing but an artificial edge imposed upon the consciousness, like space is in fact infinite. It has no dimension, it has no end point, it has no edge. It is infinite, but still in the space we try to see a shape. You see a triangular shape. You see a square, like a room space is like a square shape. Or you see a round pot is round shape. So what is a pot space is a round space. When you see a round space, it is a pot space. When you see a square space, it is like a room space, room or hall. Or when you see a flask, a conical flask in chemistry lab, this is like a triangular shape, a flask. There you see a triangular space, but the space has no dimension. But you have created a false artificial dimension. Okay. Similarly, the mind is nothing but going to the edge of the consciousness is mind. But conscious has no edge. True. But we are seeing it. How? That's what is a falseness. Mind means come like a seeing the shape, seeing the edge of water is called wave or a shape. So where there is no shape, we are trying to see the shape. That is called mind. That is called subject object duality. Okay. Subject object duality, subject object, that's called mind. That's called this state, waking state, dream state, and this world. Now he says tad buddhayaha. The shloka says, let your buddhi be that alone. That means Brahman. Now we have a non-Brahman buddhi. Means our mind is our mind is a non-Brahman. That's why we call it mind. The very mind means non-Brahman. The consciousness which assumes a shape, that is called mind. When it loses the shape, it goes to the content, it turns inward. When the mind turns inward, it loses the very mindness. It becomes no mind. No mind means what? It becomes infinite and all round. When it becomes infinite on all sides, it loses its mindness. It becomes amanaha. Manasaha amani bhavaha. Like Gaudapadacharya says in his shloka, in his karika, manasaha amani bhave. When mind becomes amana, amana means no mind. Manaha becomes amana, mind becomes no mind. Means what? Mind becomes shapeless. What is mind? Mind is shape, mind is relation. Mind is a dimension, mind means an edge, a dimension and a relation. Dimension and relation is mind. You look at your consciousness, let the mind's attention be turned towards the very content of the mind. Content of the mind is consciousness. In the consciousness, there is no dimension, there is no edge, there is no coming to the edge. That means you become a continuous, eternally continuous consciousness. Okay, eternally continuous consciousness. Then there is no end. There is no end, there is no beginning, no ending. No beginning, no ending, no shape. Then there is no mind. Mind loses its mindness. Mind is a mind only when it sees a shape and a relation, subject object. Okay. In fact, the individuality is only seeing a shape. I am this much, and the remaining. You see something other than you, and you are in relationship with the other. Me and the rest. Me and the other, and I am related with the other. This thinking, this state of mind is called mind. This state of mind is the world. This state of mind is a waking state and dream state. Now, how to give up, how to come out of waking state, how to come out of dream state? Turn your attention towards deep sleep. What is deep sleep? Deep sleep is nobody. Deep sleep is yourself. You alone is called deep sleep. You alone means what? You have neither a dimension nor there is somebody other than you. You have neither. In waking state, you have a dimension, you are this much, and there is something other than you. Is a division. You and something other than you. This division and also a relation with the other part is in your waking and dream. How to transcend waking and dream? Okay. How to transcend the waking and dream? You turn your attention. Attention means the awarefulness. When mind is divisive, when mind has a shape, still it has got awareness. Awareness means what? Knowing nature. The nature of knowing, being aware of. The conscious, it has consciousness, but it has got a shape. That is the only problem. It is consciousness, mind is consciousness alone, but it has got a shape. Shape means it is seeing an edge of it. It is seeing an end point, a periphery of it. Then it sees something other than it. So the very awareful nature of mind, turn your awareful nature of mind to such an entity that is inwardly, to your content of you, where you don't see an end point. You only see, continuously aware of. Awareness continues. There is no object of awareness. See, in waking state, awareness has an edge and you see something insentient, something other than consciousness. Then the two things happen. Your consciousness or awareness becomes a mind. Mind means has a dimension, and it sees a second thing. One is a dimension. Consciousness assumes a dimension, and you see something other than it. Anywhere you take an example of a space. In the space, once you see a shape, means what? It becomes limited, and something other than me, second one comes into existence. You become a shape. You get a shape. You get a dimension, and something other than you comes into existence. Is born. The second thing is born. These two things simultaneously happen. Here what you do is, these two things you have to simultaneously dissolve. Because the two things, I have a shape and something, second one is born. These two things simultaneously you dissolve. How? The very consciousness of the mind, the very awareness nature of mind, it is there, but that awareness turned inward. It turns inward, it doesn't look at the periphery. Like when you look at the periphery of the water, you see a wave. But how to avoid the wave and see the original water? That means don't look at the edge of it, see the content of it. You go to the content, water becomes endless. Water in the front, water in the back, water in the left, water on the right, water on the upper side, water on the downside. Water on all sides, and it is a continuous water. When it doesn't end, no shape. Water doesn't have a shape, then there is no wave. See, wave is seen only when you see the edge of it. When you see the edge of it, it becomes a wave, and something other than water starts. Other than water is born. So you come to now how to avoid that? Avoid that limitation means you look at the very consciousness. Consciousness, content of the consciousness. Consciousness means is a tentative name. The mind with a shape, a consciousness with a shape is mind. Mind without shape is consciousness. See, put it this way. A mind without a shape, without a dimension is pure consciousness. Consciousness with a dimension is mind. So mind and consciousness are not two. Okay. Mind and consciousness are not two. Mind and Atma are not two. It is a way of looking. It is the same consciousness looked in a shape is called mind. When you look at edge, in fact it doesn't have an edge like a space. Space is infinite. But still we imagine as if it has got a shape. This imagined shape, imposed, we call adhyaropita. It is adhyasta. So it is an adhyaropita shape, then it becomes a mind. It is called mind. Mind itself is an imagination. Then, so the subject-object duality is born, then you see all the world. You become an individual and something other than you. So, to avoid this duality, to transcend the duality, avoiding means transcending. You cease to be a limited being and then something else other than you, with a second one coming to existence. To avoid this duality, to transcend this duality, the same consciousness Now the consciousness is trying to see non-conscious. That means other than consciousness. The subject is seeing something other than the subject. That is object. Subject is consciousness. Because subject is seeing other than subject. Trying to see other than subject implies that you are assuming subject is limited. And there is an object has come into existence. There is something other than me. So here the subject has to remove its shape and remove the object. See, transcend its shape and transcend the object, then you become whole, one, infinity, endless consciousness. Okay. So therefore, you turn the subject is paying attention to object. Because subject nature is, it being consciousness, it is a limited consciousness, yet it is consciousness. It is limited consciousness, yet it is consciousness. So the conscious nature of the mind, its nature is to be aware of. Okay? To be aware of, to be conscious of. So let that consciousness turn its attention to the very content of consciousness. Content of consciousness means what? Let the subject, now the subject is general. I put it in a different words now. The subject is, now at the moment, the subject is seeing the object. Now let the subject see subject alone. This is the thing. Let the subject see subject alone. When it sees the subject alone, object doesn't exist apart from it, and the subject loses in individuality. Subject loses its shape. When subject loses its shape, it becomes endless, and object also ceases to exist. When subject becomes endless, object ceases. When subject becomes limited, then an object is born. When subject has got a shape, a limitation, object is born. In fact, object doesn't exist in fact. It is an artificial imposition. It is a construction of the mind. It is an artificial imposition. Therefore, to transcend this division, this divisiveness, let the subject pay attention to the subject alone. Then what happens? Two things. Subject loses its individuality. Then something other than me also ceases to exist. The second one, object, ceases to exist, and your mind loses its individuality because the consciousness is endless. Endless. It has no dimension. Like a space. Room space is space because you make a room as a small one, a dimension. When space assumes a dimension, the dimension becomes a room and something other than room. Two things are born: room and something other than room. Room, space, and outside. Inside, outside is born. This duality is born. And the space assumes a dimension. Now what you do is remove the dimension. Then the division goes away. How to remove the dimension? Don't pay attention to the edge of the room space. Room space has got a, what space? I don't know. In India, we never see any round rooms. Very rarely we see, only in the temples and such places. There are, I'm told there are round rooms also there in some Europe or America somewhere. Here mostly we have got tetraangular rooms alone. So in the tetraangular rooms, tetraangular shape, you see the edge. Then only you get a dimension and the division. Now what you do is, look at the inside the room. Inside of the room space, don't go to the edge. Turn inward your mind. Turning inward means what? Not to the edge, to the content of the space. Content of the space which has no dimension. Inward means what? Not to the edge. Inward means not to the edge, not to the dimension, just to the content of the space. When you content of the space, space becomes infinite, the edge loses its edge. There is no edge at all. Edge comes to an end, and the second thing comes to an end. You become infinite space. Okay, similarly here, let the subject see the subject itself. That's why this is where we say, let the waking state be swallowed. When you start seeing the subject yourself, the waking state is swallowed into yourself. Dream state is swallowed into yourself. You alone remain. That you alone is called deep sleep. Deep sleep is not going into another place. It is just you alone remain, without a dimension, without a second thing. Okay, without a dimension, without a second thing. When there is no dimension, there is no something other. The other ceases, you also lose your dimension, the other one also ceases, you alone remain. That's called deep sleep. Okay. Therefore, this is infinity. Tad buddhayaha. Each word you contemplate, it takes you to that. Here you see what he says, Tad buddhayaha. Bhagavan Krishna, in this shloka, he says, 17th shloka of the 5th chapter, Tad buddhayaha. Now, at the moment, our buddhi is not Tad buddhi. Tad buddhi means Paramatma buddhi, that Atma buddhi. Our buddhi means our mind. Our mind has got worldly mind. Now he says, let it be Brahman mind. Tat means Brahman. Tat means the truth, Brahman, whatever you call. The truth or Brahman. Brahman is infinite. Let your mind be infinite mind. Now our mind is a limited mind. That means our mind is a mind. Limited alone is mind. When it loses limitation, it is no more mind. Okay. So, let your tad buddhayaha, let your buddhi, let your mind be that Brahman mind, not the world mind. World means subject-object duality. I am an individual and I am seeing something else. So you have a shape and you see something other than you. You have an edge and something else you see. Okay, so this divisiveness is waking state. This divisiveness is the dream state. Now he says, come to the center, come to the contents. Okay, come to the contents. Come to the content means what? Don't go to the edge. It doesn't mean that not going. You see that you melt away the edge, because the edge doesn't exist. Edge is a false imagination. Edge doesn't exist. In your imagination alone, edge is there. You stop imagining. You look at the consciousness. Edge ceases. It's an infinite consciousness throughout. Endless. The subject is also same. Object. Now there is no subject-object duality. There is one infinite consciousness. Therefore he says, Tad buddhayaha. Okay. Tadatmanaha. Next word. I think if once you understand this Tad buddhayaha, other words you can explain yourself in the same manner. Tad buddhayaha. Tadatmanaha. Tadatma. Now Atma means me. The notion of me. I am. Now at the moment, the I am notion is placed in Atma means me, the individual me. Now my notion is, the notion of me, understanding of me is placed upon the body, placed upon the sense organs, based upon the mind. Therefore, the Atma is individualized Atma. Atma means consciousness. It is an individualized consciousness. Now he says, let your Atma be Tadatma. Atma means individuality. Let your identity be, I don't know how to use the word, whether individuality or identity is better, I think. Each time I have to shift the word, change the word, because Atma has to be Atma. You can't translate it, it's very difficult. Atma is a self. I think self is better. So let your self be not based upon the body. Then you will be Dehatma. Here he is telling Tadatma. Tadatma means that Brahman Atma. Now at the moment my Atma is Dehatma. Dehatma means bodily Atma, sense organ Atma, mind Atma. Now he says, let your Atma be not the bodily Atma, Dehatma, not the sense Atma, sensory Atma, not your mental Atma, but it be Brahman Atma. Tat means it is self-existing. So let your Atma be that Atma, not other Atma, another Atma. So here, let your identity be, identity through the body is dropped. Means let your identity be not determined based upon the body, through the body, based upon the body. So leave the body from your identity. Let your identity be based upon yourself, not upon the body. So the body is outside your identity. It doesn't form part. It doesn't form basis of your identity, nor your sense organs, nor your mind. Therefore, tadatma. Just as tadbuddhayaha is negating other buddhi, the world buddhi, negating a thought of the world and remaining consciousness. Similarly, Atma means negating the other self, bodily self, sensory self, mind self or mental self, mind self. So you are negating the mind, negating the sense organs, negating the body, and the Atma be remains that Atma. That means Brahmatma, same Atma. Atma means Atma. Atma remains itself. Atma remains, the oneself remains, the self remains oneself. I think this is, let the self be not some other self, let the self be self itself. Okay? Let the self be self itself. Let the self be Tadatma. See how beautiful expression. These words are expressions are very nice. This I think nobody, no ordinary person can write these words. These words are coming directly from Sri Krishna and directly from an explanation of Shankaracharya. Because this Tad Buddhaya, Tad Atma, Tan Nishtha. Next word. Okay, we have got 2 or 3 minutes. We'll finish in 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, Tan Nishtha. Nishtha means what he says. Nishthabhiniveshaha tatparyam sarvani karmani sanyasya tasmin brahmanyeva avasthanam yesham se tannishthah. Now it is negating nishtha. Nishtha means, how to say that? Nishtha means staying, abiding. We are abiding in something else. You are staying in something else. So come out of it. Leave that. Leave your abidance in something else. What is that something else? Here Shankaracharya says, karmani, sarvani karmani. At every moment, your mind is active, thinking, trying to understand. Your mind is in thinking, acting. Mind is continuously in some what you say, some action or some experience through mind and sense organs. Through sense organs and mind, you are continuously either active or experiencing. Action and experience are relational. You are continuously in relation with something. You are acting. Acting means you are moving. From one point to the another point, there is a movement. The movement is karma. From one point to the another point, from one shape to another shape, a continuous movement. Okay, this is called karma. We are continuously in the karma field alone, in the movement alone. He says, Tannishta, not in the movement, but you remain that infinite that, where there is no movement is possible. When you exist as an individual within time and space, movement and karma is possible. We are karmanishta. Karmanishta means we remain individuals, continuously moving, continuously acting, continuously trying to become. And he says, all the nishtha you remove, remain tannishta. Nishtha means be that. Be as that. That means what? Be as yourself. Be as yourself. To be yourself, no movement is possible. You are and be that. In being yourself, no movement is possible. No moving, no becoming, no changing, no trying, nothing is there. Therefore, dropping all karmas and staying as what you are already are. Stay as what you already are. Tannishta, tatparayana. I think that tatparayana and jnana nirdosha kalmasha, other things remain. I think that we'll talk in the next class. Now I have come back from my Tamil Nadu trip. I think hereafter I have nowhere to go, at least for some time. Hereafter we will have regularly every Sunday Gita and my other classes also. Now in the near future I have nowhere to go. I visited Chidambaram, is a Shiva temple in Tamil Nadu. I stayed there. There was one small ashram. So I stayed there for some time and then came back. Now we can continue. Okay? Today's class ends. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. So hereafter we'll continue Sugama classes also and then Vedanta Paribhasha also. Okay. Om.